In this lesson, we're going to jump into Photoshop and we're going to start creating our mockup. Now, we're going to open up Photoshop and it'll come up with this screen. This is our recent projects here. We just want to come over to create new. I can also come down to file, new. And I am going to create a 1920 by 1080. Now, I'm going to leave the resolution fairly low because this is the web resolution, 72 dpi or pixels per inch, and we're going to leave it at that, and RGB. I'm going to hit create. Alright, so with this file I have provided some images. I found these images across Pexels and multiple other free stock websites, and you can go find those images yourself if you want. So the first thing I'm going to bring in is a background, and this is provided in the files, your exercise files, so you can download it down below. And we're just going to drag one in. This image is fairly large, so it can be scaled a lot more. We'll scale it up to size like so, and we're going to hit enter. And that is going to be our background for this. Another way I could add a background is I got some multiple paper textures here, and I could add that as a background. Let's leave it as this, and we're going to add in a shape here. We're going to add it about here, and we need our rectangle tool to do so. So let's select our rectangle tool, come over here, and I'm just going to, what we might want to do is actually do it to the size of the document, and then we can change the size. So we're going to go to 10, we're going to do it millimeters by 297 mil, and this is A4 document size, and I can just drag that into place like so. And maybe I want to scale this, so we're going to go Control or Command T if you're on a Mac, and we don't have to hold Shift anymore. We used to have to hold Shift to scale to proportion. I'm just going to scale it nice and big, much bigger, like so. And we're going to sort of place it in here so it looks fairly nice. Place it somewhere there, and you just press enter to make that transform. And now what we can do is drop a image onto this, and I've got a texture up here. It's a paper texture, and I'm going to bring it in, drop it down on top. As you can see, it's very rough, and we're just going to drag it so it's covering the black paper. And then all I have to do is hold Alt, and between the layers I can just click. So you have to come up with this, and it's making a clipping mask, which means whatever this is in this layer will only show in the visible areas of the layer it is clipped to. And we've created that clipping mask. Now what I could do is drop the opacity, or we could add a blending mode. Let's add a overlay blending mode, and let's change the color of our paper to white. And we can change that back to something like multiply, drop the opacity to just get that really light texture. Now lastly, what I want to do to this shape is add a little bit of a drop shadow on one side. So I can double click on the layer. That's going to bring up our layer styles, and I can come down here to drop shadow, and I've actually got two drop shadows added, so let's delete one. Let's tick the drop shadow on, and it'll show you a preview here. So currently our drop shadows over here, and that's the side we want it on. As you can sort of see by the background image, we have a bit of light here, and it sort of fades off into this area. So what I'm going to do is, let's make the opacity bright. We can see it down here. I'm going to put the spread up just so I can see it. We're going to take it out to about there, that direction. We can change the size up so it's nice and big, so we can actually see it, and take the spread down a bit, and we can move the distance out just slightly, and then we can drop the opacity once again. It's very subtle, so if I just turn it off and on, it's very hard to see, but you can see it down here. If I zoom in, Control or Command plus, I can zoom in over here, you can see the little line. Let's toggle it on and off, you can just see it, and it's just a tiny bit of a drop shadow. Another thing we may like to add is if we open this up, we can play around with effects. Sometimes an inner shadow works. We might want an inner shadow on this side. Let's grab a black or a darker color. Let's make the inner shadow over here. Let's take the opacity up, and we just want to go normal so we can see it. And we go back to multiply, and I'm going to change the size up. We're going to move the distance so it's in, change the size even further up. The choke, we want that down as far as possible, and then we move the distance back. And I'm going to change the angle even more so it's more on that side, and then I'm just going to bring the opacity right down. It's just very subtle effect. Now if we turn that off and on, you can see we've added a bit of a shadow to the paper. Now we're going to add in some shadowed leaves, and I'll show you how to create those shadowed leaves in a second, but we're also going to animate those. So we're going to add the shadowed leaves in After Effects, and we'll make them animated. And there's two ways we can do that. We can either jump into After Effects and export it as a GIF, as a repeating GIF, and we'll probably do that so that we can still use it in this document as a template. Or we can take this whole file over to After Effects and animate it over there. I'm going to do it the other way and animate the GIF, just the leaves, inside After Effects, and then bring it across to here. Alright, the next thing I want to do is add a new layer on top of this clipping mask. So I can click on the clipping mask and add a new layer down here. Let's bring it up. Let's make it a clipping mask. And then I want to turn this one into, rename it, artwork. This is where we're going to add our artwork. And what we can do here is maybe I want to copy this shape. Let's copy and paste it. Command V. We've copied and pasted the shape. Let's delete that artwork and rename this one artwork. That way we have a shape to work off. Now let's make that a clipping mask in there. Now we're going to move this back into place like so, and this is where our artwork's going to go. We're going to delete the layer effects, turn them off, because we want to set this up to like overlay or multiply the blending mode. And I'm just going to right click, let's delete the effects, blending option. Okay, let's right click, come up to here, clear layer style. There we are. We've got our artwork. We can right click this now and make this a smart object. And that's when we can double click on this, double click, and we've got our artwork in here. I can turn that off so we can't see it. And then we can go ahead and drag our illustration in. And all you have to do is drag the Illustrator file. few things before we drag that Illustrator file in. We want to hide certain layers and delete other layers, like the swatches layers we had open. So we'll wait for Illustrator to open up. Alright, so all I want to do here is just delete that top layer. Let's hit delete, let's select all this, and we're just going to scale it nice and big. So it's nice and big, and you just save it. Control S to save, and then I can minimize this, and I just have to drag that same file I just opened into Photoshop. And it's going to open it as a page. Let's hit OK. We can scale this because it's vector, and we can scale it to any size. I'm just going to hit enter there, and I'm also going to get some text. Let's add some text like cabin. Let's go Command A to select all that text, and we're just going to make it nice and big so we can see it. And I'm actually liking that font. Let's make it a bit smaller. Select all that. Playfair, let's make it a bit smaller and a bit smaller in size. We can also edit the size by pressing Control, and we can just scale it down. I'm holding Alt to scale it from the center. It's actually warping it, so I'm going to hold Shift to hold proportions. Then we have the little cabin. Now we want to just align this visually, so I'm going to move it across a bit because the house is sort of centered to this side. So if we move this layer over a tiny bit, maybe about here, it looks visually centered. Let's make that bold again so we can actually read it. And then all we have to do from here is go Command S to save. We can go back to our other document, and it's a smart object. So what we want to do here is we have part of the image cropped off. So if we come back here to our artwork, we can bring it all up into view and go Control S to save. And there we have our image coming in. What we want to do is clip it to this layer on top of there, so that only goes inside that layer. What I can do here is add a blending mode. Now what I would usually do is come down to maybe multiply, and you can just drop the opacity. Another way to work this is to add a pattern overlay, and I've got a few patterns here, and you can add that. I'm not going to do that for this lesson, but there we have our cabin, and it's placed onto our mockup. I might make it a bit smaller over here. Select that, Control T, make it a lot smaller, bring it up a little bit, press enter, Control S to save that document, come back to here, and we have it done. Next thing I would like to do is come to my exercise files, and we have some plant shadows I have done. So what I did to grab the plant shadows is I come in here and I pulled in an image exactly like this. So if you can find an image like this, it'd be a great help. And I just unlocked it over here. And we come up to image, we go to mode, and we can go to grayscale. And we want to discard all the color. Now what I can do is open up my levels, and I also want to bring up some brightness and contrast. We may not need it. We'll come into our levels and we just pull this over to the side, and we just pull this side over, and that way we're tightening the blacks and whites so that we're only showing colors between here, and we're pulling all these colors back into here, so we're taking any shadows. We got some detail missing over here, but that's going to be alright. Alright, so we won't need the brightness and contrast. Maybe editing it might help that layer. Alright, what I want to do now is merge all the selected layers. So select them all and merge layers. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go select color range, and what we're going to do is get this little eyedropper and just click on the color, and we'll just make the fuzziness a bit more, push it up. I'm going to press OK, and then all we have to do is hit this little mask icon, and that's going to mask it so that we've got no other colors anywhere. Now what I can do to this layer is select it, and what we might do is apply this mask. So apply layer mask by right clicking it and apply layer mask, and that way we've deleted the extra color, and also we have applied it to it so we have a transparent background. And we can come up to here and go filter, blur, and we can go Gaussian blur. We can pump this up a bit. We just want a nice blur, a bit like a bokeh. Alright, so as you can see in this blur we have some little lines. You can see some defining lines there, and this, you may not be able to see this depending on your screen, but it's called banding, and this occurs when we have a low bit depth in our image, and I believe we're at an 8-bit depth. So if I come up to image mode, I can see 8 bits per channel. If I go 16, gradients are going to look a lot better. Alright, what I'm going to do is save this image, file save as, and we'll save this into plant shadows. Now I already have some images saved in here, so we can save that as a PNG, and I have this one already saved, as you can see, and I've just put an alpha at the end of it. You could rename it to something like plant shadow alpha, and alpha just means transparent layer, and you have to save it as a PNG because PNGs keep the transparent layers, unlike JPEGs. Let's press save. Let's hit OK. And there we have it. We can close that, and we don't need to save it as a Photoshop document unless you want to come back to it. And I don't need to come back to it. So let's hit no. And we can also save this document in here, something like cabin mockup. And we're going to hit save. Okay. Alright, next one I'm going to jump into is some After Effects, and what I can do in the After Effects is just animate that leaf. So we just add a little bit of a breeze to the leaves, and then we'll bring it back in here and place it into the document. Let's do that now.